Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching. You know, this ancient Chinese text that's had a pretty big impact, and we're going to explore why that is. We've got a stack of articles and some of your notes, so we'll try to pull out the most interesting bits.
Yeah, that's right. The Tao Te Ching can be a little bit of a puzzle,
Yeah,
but it's full of these little nuggets of wisdom that can really shift your perspective.
exactly. So where do we even begin with something as vast as the Tao Te Ching?
Well, the heart of it all is this concept of the Tao.
Okay.
It's the source of everything, this force that drives the universe. But here's the catch. It's not something you can just define or pin down.
Okay. So how do you even talk about something that you can't define?
The Tao Te Ching itself addresses this right out of the gate.
Okay.
The first line says, "The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao."
So right from the start, it's telling us we're in for a ride. I mean, how can something be the source of everything and yet be impossible to define?
Think of it like trying to explain what gravity is. To someone who's never experienced it,
Right.
you can describe its effects, like things falling down, planets orbiting. But the essence of gravity itself remains elusive.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So we can see the effects of the Tao all around us in the changing seasons, the flow of a river, even in the ups and downs of our own lives. But the Tao itself is this invisible force behind it all.
Precisely. And the Tao Te Ching uses all sorts of imagery and metaphors to try to point us towards an understanding of it.
Okay.
It's not about arriving at a neat definition, but rather developing a felt sense of the Tao.
Like that metaphor about the valley, that one always stuck with me.
Yes, the valley. The Tao Te Ching describes a valley that effortlessly gathers water, simply because it's situated lower than everything around it. It's not striving, it's not trying to collect water, it just does naturally by virtue of its position. This is a great illustration of Tia, another key concept.
So Tates isn't about trying to be a good person in the traditional sense. It's not about following a set of rules or striving for some kind of moral perfection.
Exactly. Te is about aligning yourself with the Tao,
Okay.
embodying its effortless flow, just like the valley. It's about finding that sweet spot where action arises naturally, without force or struggle.
That makes me think about how we approach challenges in our own lives. So often we try to force things to happen to control outcomes. But maybe there's a different way, a way of working with the natural flow of things instead of against it.
You're right on track. The Tao Te Ching offers a radically different perspective on how to navigate life. And this idea aligning with the Tao is central to it.
Now, one area where this really plays out is in leadership.
Right.
And I know this is a theme that comes up a lot in your notes, too. So what does the Tao Te Ching have to say about leadership?
It emphasizes a style of leadership that is very different from what we typically see. It highlights Wu Wei, which is often translated as non-action or effortless action.
Okay, I can already sense the paradox here. So it's not about being passive, right?
Not at all. It's more about acting in harmony with the natural order of things. Like a sailor adjusting their sails to the wind. It's about understanding the underlying currents and moving with them rather than trying to force your own agenda.
So it's less about commanding and controlling, more about understanding and adapting. Almost like a gardener creating the right conditions for things to grow rather than trying to force them into a particular shape.
Precisely. The Tao Te Ching uses the analogy of a ruler who accomplishes great things by doing nothing,
Okay.
not by imposing his will, but by allowing the people to flourish naturally.
That's a pretty radical concept,
Yeah.
especially in a world that seems obsessed with control and dominance. It almost makes you wonder what could be possible if we approached leadership and life in general from this perspective of Wu Wei.
That's a great question, and one that the Tao Te Ching keeps circling back to.
This idea of Wu Wei is really intriguing, but before we dive deeper into that, I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier. The world as a spiritual vessel. What exactly did you mean by that?
This is where the Tao Te Ching really starts to challenge our assumptions about the nature of reality.
Okay.
It suggests that the world isn't just a physical space we inhabit, but something much more profound, something sacred.
Okay, now I'm really curious to unpack this. So if the world is this spiritual vessel, how does that change the way we live in it? How does that affect our actions, our relationships, our understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things?
That's exactly the question the Tao Te Ching invites us to contemplate.
This is already so much to think about. I think we need a moment to let all of this sink in before we go any further. What do you say? All right, I think I've caught my breath. That was a lot to take in. But before we move on, can we circle back to this idea of the world as a spiritual vessel? It really sparked my curiosity.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it? And it's not just some poetic flourish. It really gets to the heart of how the Tao Te Ching sees the world. Think of it this way. If the world is a vessel, what is it holding?
Hmm. I'm not sure I follow. What do you mean?
Well, a vessel is designed to contain something, right?
Hmm.
A vase holds flowers, a cup holds water. So if the world is a vessel, what does it contain? The Tao Te Ching suggests it's something beyond the physical, a spiritual essence, a deeper meaning.
Okay. I think I see where you're going with this. So it's not just about the mountains and rivers, the trees and the stars. It's about something more, something that gives it all meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And if the world is this sacred container, then our actions within it take on a whole new significance. It's not just about what we do on a physical level, but also about the impact we have on this deeper spiritual level.
That makes me think about how we treat the environment, for example. If we see the world as just a collection of resources to exploit, then we might not think twice about polluting a river or cutting down a forest. But if we see it as this spiritual vessel, then we're going to approach those actions with a lot more reverence and care.
That's a great example. And it's not just about our relationship with the environment. This idea also has implications for how we interact with each other. If we recognize the sacredness of the world, then we also recognize the sacredness in each other.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So instead of seeing other people as competitors or obstacles, we start to see them as fellow travelers, sharing this sacred space with us.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And this ties back to the idea of Te that we were discussing earlier. Remember how we talked about Te being about aligning with the Tao?
Yeah, like the valley effortlessly gathering water.
Right. Well, the Tao Te Ching suggests that Te isn't just something we cultivate individually, but it's also something that exists between people. When we interact with each other from a place of Te, we create harmony and balance.
That makes sense. So if I'm understanding this correctly, Te is kind of like the glue that holds this spiritual vessel together. It's the force that allows all the different parts to work together harmoniously.
That's a great way to think about it. It's like the energy that flows between people, connecting us and nurturing us. And when we're aligned with the Tao, that energy flows more freely, creating a sense of peace and well-being.
This is making me rethink a lot of things, especially in terms of leadership. Earlier, we talked about how the Tao Te Ching emphasizes Wu Wei effortless action and leadership. Does this idea of the world as a spiritual vessel connect to that in any way?
Absolutely. If we see the world as this sacred container, then the role of a leader shifts dramatically. It's no longer about control or dominance, but about service and stewardship. It's about nurturing the well-being of all within that vessel, not just a select few.
So it's more about guiding and supporting the natural unfolding of things, rather than trying to impose one's will on the world.
Yes, and this is where Wu Wei comes in. A leader who embodies Wu Wei doesn't try to force things to happen. Instead, they create the conditions for things to flourish organically. They listen deeply, they observe carefully, and they act in a way that supports the natural flow of energy.
You know, it's fascinating how the Tao Te Ching takes these seemingly abstract concepts, the Tao Te Wu Wei, and weaves them together into this coherent worldview. It's like a tapestry where each thread contributes to the overall beauty and complexity of the design.
That's a wonderful analogy. And just like with a tapestry, it takes time to appreciate the intricacies of the Tao Te Ching. But the more we engage with it, the more its wisdom reveals itself to us.
I'm sensing a but coming here.
Well, the Tao Te Ching doesn't shy away from the challenges of putting these ideas into practice. In fact, it explicitly acknowledges that living in accordance with the Tao isn't always easy.
That makes sense. I mean, it goes against so much of what our culture tells us about success and achievement.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with messages about striving, competing, and conquering.
Exactly. And the Tao Te Ching offers a counter-narrative to that. It invites us to consider a different path, one that's based on harmony, balance, and effortless action.
I'm starting to see how this ancient text can be so relevant to our modern lives. It's almost like an antidote to the stress and anxiety that comes with our fast-paced, achievement-oriented culture.
It is. And it's a reminder that true fulfillment doesn't come from external achievements, but from aligning ourselves with the deeper currents of life.
This all ties back to that concept of Wu Wei we were discussing. But I think we need to unpack that a bit more because it's such a central idea in the Tao Te Ching.
I agree. It's a concept that can be easily misunderstood. So let's delve into Wu Wei and explore how it can guide us toward a more balanced and fulfilling way of being in the world.
All right, Wu Wei. It's one of those terms that sounds really simple on the surface, but the more you think about it, the more complex it becomes. So help me out here. What exactly does Wu Wei mean? And how can we actually practice it in our daily lives?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's deceptively simple, yet profoundly challenging. Wu Wei is often translated as non-action, but as we've touched on, it's not about sitting around doing nothing.
Right.
It's about aligning your actions with the natural flow of the Tao.
So it's more about effortless action, right? Like finding that sweet spot where you're working with the universe, not against it.
Exactly. Imagine a river flowing down a mountain. It doesn't struggle or force its way through obstacles. It simply flows around them, finding the path of least resistance. That's the essence of Wu Wei. Effortless movement, harmonious action.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But how does this translate to real life situations? Like, let's say I'm facing a conflict at work. How can I approach that with Wu Wei?
Well, instead of immediately reacting or trying to force a solution, you might take a step back. Observe the situation, listen to all sides, and allow the best course of action to emerge naturally. It's not about being passive, but about responding with wisdom and clarity rather than reacting out of fear or ego.
So it's more about taking that pause, that breath,
Yeah.
and responding in a way that's aligned with the situation rather than just reacting blindly.
Precisely. And this applies not only to external conflicts, but also to those internal struggles we all face. You know, those moments of self-doubt, fear, or frustration.
Yeah.
Instead of fighting those feelings, Wu Wei invites us to simply acknowledge them, observe them, and allow them to pass through us.
This all sounds great in theory, but I have to admit I'm a bit skeptical. Our world values action, productivity, constantly striving for more. How can this idea of Wu Wei possibly work in such a fast-paced, competitive environment?
That's a valid concern. It's true that our culture often glorifies busyness and achievement, but the Tao Te Ching reminds us that there's another way, a path that leads to greater balance and fulfillment.
You know, it's interesting. We've been talking about how the Tao Te Ching offers these profound insights into leadership, our relationship with the world, and even our inner lives. But I'm wondering, for someone who's just starting to explore these ideas, what's a good way to actually integrate them into their life? It can all feel a bit overwhelming at first.
You're right. It can be a lot to take in. I think the key is to approach it with a sense of curiosity and playfulness. Don't feel like you need to understand everything perfectly right away. Start by reading small passages from the Tao Te Ching, just a few lines each day, and see what resonates with you.
So it's more about absorbing the essence, the feeling, rather than trying to intellectually dissect it.
Exactly. And look for opportunities to apply these principles in your daily life. Notice those moments where you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, and see if you can bring in a bit of Wu Wei, that sense of effortless action.
Maybe it's taking a pause before responding to a challenging email, or choosing to go for a walk in nature instead of scrolling through social media.
Those are great examples. It's about finding those little ways to shift your perspective, to align your actions with the natural flow of the Tao.
This has been such a fascinating exploration. It's amazing how an ancient text like the Tao Te Ching can offer such timeless wisdom.
It really speaks to the enduring power of these ideas. And even though we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, we've only scratched the surface. The Tao Te Ching is a text that unfolds its layers of meaning over time as we continue to engage with it.
I think that's a beautiful invitation to keep exploring, to keep learning, to keep deepening our understanding of the Tao. And maybe in that process, we'll find ourselves moving a little more effortlessly through the world, a little more in harmony with ourselves and everything around us.
That's a wonderful way to put it. Remember, the journey of the Tao is not about reaching a destination, but about embracing the journey itself.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic you're curious about. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.